All right, let's jump right in. We've all been there, right? You get this amazing idea, maybe a new piece of tech that you just know is going to be a game changer. But then you hit the hard part. How do you actually turn that great idea into something that works, that people actually use? Well, that's what we're breaking down today. The 7 key processes that make all the difference.
But first, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Why do so many of these promising new systems just fail? You pour all this time and money into a project, and it either stalls out or people just ignore it and it never quite lives up to the hype. It's a super common and, let's be honest, really frustrating problem.
So what gives? Here's the secret, and it might surprise you. It's almost never about the technology itself. The software, the hardware, that stuff usually works just fine. The real reason things fall apart is the process, or more like the lack of a process we build around it. That's where success or failure really happens.
And this is where the source material for today's explainer really nails it. It pinpoints exactly where things go wrong by identifying 7, count them, 7 very specific processes that you absolutely have to have in place to support any new system. Think of them as the 7 essential ingredients. Now, I know what you're thinking. 7 things? That's a lot to try and remember. So to make this way easier to wrap our heads around, we're going to group those 7 processes into 3 simple core pillars. Trust me, this framework makes it so much more actionable. And here they are, the 3 pillars of success: the technology, the people, and the strategy. You can kind of think of these like the 3 legs of a stool. If any one of them is shaky or just flat out missing, the whole thing is going to come crashing down. So, let's dig into what each of these really means.
First up, pillar number 1, the technology. And look, this isn't just about the cool new tool you bought. It's really about the systems you have running in the background to manage it and keep it healthy for the long run.
So under this pillar, we've got 2 big processes. The first is having a solid maintenance program. This is like the system's regular checkup at the doctor, often using tools like a CMMS. And second, you need a formal way to predict and analyze failures. The whole point here is to stop being reactive, just fighting fires, and start being proactive, catching problems before they happen. And that proactive approach really comes from this idea of predictive analytics. This is the engine that makes it all work. You're basically using your past data to predict the future, spotting where a breakdown is likely to happen. I mean, it's pretty much the closest thing we have to a crystal ball for our systems. Okay, but you could have the smartest, most predictive tech in the world, and it would be totally useless if nobody on your team knows how to use it. And that brings us right to our second, and you could argue most important pillar, the people. Under the people pillar, we're focusing on 2 things. First, making sure your team has the skills they need to actually run the new system. And second, and this is a big one that gets missed all the time, creating standard procedures for everyone to follow. This is how you get all that critical tribal knowledge out of just one person's brain and turn it into a clear, repeatable playbook for the whole team.
Now, when we talk about getting those skills, you've basically got 2 main options. You can train your current team, which is great because you're building on all the knowledge they already have about your organization, or you can hire new folks from the outside to bring in some fresh perspectives and expertise. Honestly, there's no single right answer. It really just depends on what you need.
Okay, so we have our tech set up and we have a skilled team ready to roll. The final piece of the puzzle, our third pillar, is the strategy. This is the blueprint that pulls everything together and makes sure we're all moving in the same direction. And here we find our last 3 processes. You need a communication strategy because if people don't get the why, they'll never get on board. You need a way for people to suggest improvements so the system doesn't get outdated the day after you launch it. And finally, you absolutely need a plan for continual improvement. This is the real engine for long-term success. Because let's be real, implementation is not a finish line. It's a circle. It's a cycle. You develop your plan, you implement it, you measure how it's doing, and then, and this is the most important part, you use that data to improve it. And then, you do it all over again. That's what keeps a system alive and valuable, instead of turning into a dusty old relic. So let's pull all these threads together. The real magic doesn't happen when you focus on just one of these pillars. It happens when you create a balance between all 3. They really have to work together, in harmony.
And here it is, the big picture. All 7 of those processes we started with, they fit perfectly into our 3 pillars. You've got your tech side covered with maintenance and failure prediction, you've got your people covered with skills and standard procedures, and tying it all together is the strategy. Communication, process improvement, and that all-important cycle of continual improvement. See how it all connects?
If you take away one thing, let it be this. A successful implementation is not just a one-time event you check off a list. It's a living, breathing, balanced ecosystem of technology, people, and strategy. You have to feed and water all three parts for it to really thrive.
So, I'll leave you with a question to chew on. Thinking about your next big project, or even the one you're working on right now, which of these three pillars, technology, people, or strategy, really needs your attention the most? Something to think about.